I pulled into my parents' driveway in suburban Denver, my heart racing with excitement as I grabbed my carefully packed beach bag from the passenger seat. The sunscreen bottle felt warm in my hands, and I could practically taste the pineapple drinks waiting for me in Hawaii. After months of planning and saving every penny from my marketing coordinator's salary, this family vacation felt like the perfect reward. I bounded up the familiar concrete steps expecting hugs and last-minute packing chaos. Instead, my mother, Sandra, opened the door with a stone-cold expression that made my stomach drop. "You were never actually on the guest list," she said flatly. "We figured you'd be fine alone." The words hit me like ice water in my veins. I stood there clutching my beach bag, staring at my mother's face for any sign that this was some twisted joke. Behind her, I could see my sister Carla's designer luggage stacked neatly by the staircase, and my brother-in-law, Derek, loading a cooler into their rental car. "What do you mean I'm not on the guest list?" I managed to whisper, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay composed. "We've been planning this trip for months. I took vacation days. I bought new swimsuits." Sandra stepped back from the doorway, her arms crossed over her floral blouse. "Carla convinced us that the smaller villa would be more economical. 4 bedrooms instead of 5. We decided you wouldn't really fit in with our plans anyway." The casual cruelty in her tone made my knees weak. Through the open door, I could hear Carla's voice drifting from the kitchen, bright and cheerful, as she talked about snorkeling excursions and sunset dinners, the same excursions I had researched and recommended during our family planning calls. "But I helped organize this whole trip," I said, stepping closer to the threshold. "I found the resort. I researched the activities. I sent you all those links to restaurants." Derek appeared behind Sandra, his polo shirt already wrinkled from travel preparation. "Helen, come on, don't make this dramatic. We're trying to have a peaceful family vacation." "Peaceful," I repeated slowly, "by lying to me for months." Carla emerged from the kitchen, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail, designer sunglasses perched on her head. She looked past me toward my car as if I were an inconvenient delivery person. "We thought you'd understand," Carla said with that patronizing tone she'd perfected since her wedding 3 years ago. "You're always so busy with work anyway. And honestly, Helen, you can be a bit much sometimes. We wanted this vacation to be about relaxation and family bonding." "I am family," I said, my voice barely audible. "Of course you are," Sandra said quickly, but her eyes were already looking past me toward the street. "We just thought you'd be happier staying home. You know how you get around crowds and new places." The realization crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't a last-minute decision. They had been planning this exclusion for months, while I excitedly participated in group chats about dinner reservations and beach activities. Every family call where we discussed the itinerary, every time I shared my research about Hawaiian culture and hidden gems, they were already plotting to leave me behind. I watched Derek load another suitcase, this one clearly belonging to my father, based on the old American Airlines tags still attached to the handle. Dad emerged from the garage, checking his watch with the methodical precision he brought to everything. "Thomas," Sandra called to him. "Helen stopped by." Dad looked up, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. "Oh, hi, sweetheart. We're just heading out to catch our flight." The normalcy in his voice was the final blow. He genuinely seemed surprised to see me, as if my presence at their departure was unexpected rather than planned, as if I hadn't been part of every conversation about this trip for the past 4 months. "Dad," I started, but Carla cut me off. "We really need to get going. The airport traffic is going to be insane, and you know how Derek gets about being late." Derek nodded solemnly, as if punctuality for their excluding vacation was a matter of life and death. TSA lines are brutal this time of year. I stood there watching my family load their car with luggage I should have helped carry, watching them check their phones for flight updates I should have been receiving too. The beach bag in my hand felt heavier with each passing second. "Well," I said, finally backing down the steps, "have a wonderful time." Sandra's face softened slightly, perhaps recognizing the devastation in my voice. "Helen, don't be upset. We'll send you pictures." Pictures. They would send me pictures of the vacation I had helped plan but wasn't allowed to join. Pictures of the family bonding I wasn't worthy of participating in. I walked back to my car in a daze, their voices fading as they continued their departure preparations. Through my rearview mirror, I watched them gather on the driveway, probably relieved that the uncomfortable confrontation was over. As I drove away, I could see them in my side mirror, standing together as a complete unit, watching my car disappear around the corner. The drive back to my Phoenix apartment felt endless. Every mile gave me more time to process what had just happened, and with each passing exit sign, the reality became more surreal. I kept replaying Sandra's words, searching for some explanation that would make sense of the cruelty. By the time I reached my complex, the sun was setting behind the desert mountains, painting everything in shades of orange that should have felt beautiful, but instead seemed mocking. I dragged myself up 2 flights of stairs to my 1-bedroom apartment, the beach bag still clutched in my hand like evidence of a crime. I dropped onto my couch and stared at the Hawaii guidebook scattered across my coffee table. The yellow sticky notes marking restaurant recommendations felt like artifacts from another life. 3 months of research vacation day requests and excited planning, all for a trip I was apparently never invited to join. My phone buzzed against the cushions. A text from my best friend Madison, "Safe travels, can't wait to see all your Hawaii pics." I couldn't bring myself to respond. How do you explain that your entire family conspired to exclude you from a vacation while maintaining the illusion that you were included? How do you admit that you were stupid enough to fall for months of lies? Around 10:30 that evening, my phone chimed with a notification from Venmo. My heart stopped when I saw Carla's name on the screen. Payment request from Carla Martinez, $4,800. The memo line read, "Your share of flights and villa, family trip expenses." I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. They wanted me to pay $4,800 for a vacation they had deliberately excluded me from. My share of expenses for a trip where my presence was apparently so unwanted that they had lied to my face for months. I screenshot the request and set my phone aside, hands shaking with rage. The audacity was breathtaking. Not only had they planned this exclusion while pretending I was included, but they expected me to fund their betrayal. My laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, still displaying my work emails from earlier that day. I opened Facebook and searched for my family's profiles, my stomach churning as I found what I was looking for. Carla's most recent post, uploaded 2 hours ago, finally boarding. Can't wait for our family bonding time in paradise. Sometimes the best trips are the intimate ones. 43 likes already, including several from relatives and family friends who probably had no idea I had been deliberately excluded. The comments were full of heart emojis and have fun messages that felt like salt in fresh wounds. Derek had posted a photo of their boarding passes, carefully angled to hide the names, but clearly showing 4 tickets to Honolulu. 4 tickets for the 4 family members who mattered. The caption read, "Vacation mode activated. No stress, no drama, just family love." No drama, as if I were the source of drama rather than the victim of their calculated cruelty. I scrolled through more posts, finding photos of their airport dinner, their excitement about the flight, their gratitude for quality time with the people who matter most. Each post felt like a deliberate slap, a public celebration of my exclusion. My phone buzzed again. Another Venmo notification, this time from Derek. Payment request $700. Reminder, Helen's portion of resort activities and car rental. $700 more. They were itemizing my exclusion, demanding payment for every aspect of the vacation I wasn't allowed to join. The car rental, I wouldn't use; the activities I wouldn't participate in, the memories I wouldn't be allowed to make. I opened my laptop and started typing a response email to Carla, then deleted it. Started a text message, then deleted that too. Every word I wanted to say felt inadequate for the magnitude of their betrayal. Instead, I opened my banking app and stared at my savings account. The money I had been carefully setting aside for Hawaii sat there like a monument to my stupidity. $1,500 that should have been going toward my own flight and accommodations money I had saved by skipping dinners out and buying generic groceries. Around midnight, my phone rang. Carla's name appeared on the screen, probably calling from some airport lounge or hotel lobby. "Helen," she said when I answered, her voice artificially bright. "Did you see my Venmo request?" "I saw it." "Great, so you can just send that payment whenever. I know it seems like a lot, but we had to upgrade to a nicer villa when we found out the original one had some issues." The lie came so easily to her that I almost admired the skill. Issues. Yeah, plumbing problems or something. Anyway, the new place is amazing. You would have loved it. Would have loved it. Past tense, as if my exclusion were some unfortunate accident rather than their deliberate choice. "Carla," I said slowly, "why exactly do you think I should pay for a vacation I'm not on?" Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of airport announcements in the background. "Well, you were part of the planning," she said finally, "and family trips are a shared expense. You know how Dad feels about everyone contributing equally. Equal contribution for unequal treatment. The mathematics of their logic made my head spin." "I see," I said. "And when exactly were you planning to tell me I wasn't actually invited?" "Helen, don't be dramatic. We told you today." "You told me today that you had been planning this exclusion for months while lying to my face about including me." "We weren't lying. Plans change. The villa situation changed and we had to make adjustments." The casualness in her voice was more infuriating than outright cruelty would have been. She genuinely seemed to believe that her explanation made sense, that their behavior was reasonable and justified. "I have to go," I said. "Have a wonderful vacation." I hung up before she could respond and stared at my phone for a long moment. The Venmo requests sat there like digital bills for services, not rendered payment demands for inclusion I had been denied. Then I opened Venmo and sent Carla exactly $1 with a memo that would change everything. "You'll have a surprise." The satisfaction of sending that $1 payment felt like the first breath of air after drowning. I sat in my dark apartment, the glow from my phone screen illuminating my face as I stared at the transaction confirmation. $1.00 with a message that carried more weight than they would understand until it was too late. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with calls and messages. First Carla, then Derek, then my parents, as the news of my insult spread through their vacation group chat. Carla's text arrived first. "Are you kidding me right now? $1, this is so typical of your petty behavior." Then Derek, "Helen, we're trying to enjoy our family time. Please don't create drama from across the country." Dad's message was more measured. "Sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we talk when we get back?" But it was Mom's text that revealed the true scope of their manipulation. "Your father and I are very disappointed in your selfishness. We raised you better than this. Your cousin Jessica called asking why you weren't coming, and we had to explain that you chose to stay home rather than contribute to family expenses." Chose to stay home. They had told our extended family that I had opted out of the vacation, making me look like the selfish family member who couldn't be bothered to join their bonding experience. The lie was so complete, so carefully constructed, that even our relatives believed I was the problem. I screenshot every message and started a folder on my phone labeled Family Lies. If they wanted to play games with the truth, I would document every move they made. Around 2 a.m, Carla called again. I let it go to voicemail, then played back her message. "Helen, I don't know what your problem is, but you're ruining our vacation before it even starts. Mom is crying because of your behavior, and Dad is talking about cutting the trip short to deal with your drama. Is this really what you want to destroy our family time because you're upset about a simple financial contribution?" The reversal was masterful. Somehow I had become the villain in a story where I was the victim. My reaction to their betrayal was now evidence of my character flaws, proof that they had been right to exclude me in the first place. I called my cousin Jessica in Colorado, knowing she would be awake because of her night shift job at the hospital. "Helen," she answered on the first ring, "I was just thinking about you. Your mom said you decided to skip Hawaii to focus on work. That seems so unlike you." "What exactly did she tell you?" "Just that you felt the vacation would be too stressful with your job situation, and you preferred to stay home and save money. She seemed really sad about it, said the family wouldn't be the same without you there." The manipulation was even more sophisticated than I had realized. They hadn't just excluded me. They had crafted a narrative that made me look like the one who had abandoned the family. My mother's sadness about my absence was probably genuine, since she had convinced herself that the lie was true. "Jessica," I said carefully, "did Mom mention anything about villa capacity or booking issues?" "No, nothing like that. She just said you were going through some personal stuff and needed space from family obligations." Personal stuff. Family obligations. They had pathologized my absence, turning their exclusion of me into my need for distance. The story they told made them seem caring and understanding, while portraying me as troubled and antisocial. After I hung up with Jessica, I spent the next hour calling and texting other family members. The story was consistent across every conversation. According to my parents and Carla, I had voluntarily removed myself from the Hawaii plans due to work stress and personal issues. Some relatives even offered words of encouragement about taking care of my mental health and not overcommitting to family events. The gaslighting was so complete that I started to question my own memory of events. Had there been signs that I was supposed to decline the invitation? Had I misunderstood something fundamental about the planning process? Then I remembered the group chat messages I had saved, the excitement in my voice during planning calls, the research documents I had shared with enthusiasm. There was no ambiguity in my participation or my desire to join the vacation. They had deliberately deceived me and then lied to our extended family about the deception. By sunrise, my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls and 42 text messages from various family members. Some were confused relatives asking for clarification about my absence. Others were angry messages from my immediate family, demanding that I stop creating problems and pay your fair share like an adult. The financial pressure was escalating too. Derek had sent 2 additional payment requests, $300 for Helen's share of airport parking and transportation, and $200 for vacation insurance coverage for 4 people. They were nickel and diming me for every expense associated with a trip I wasn't on, as if my exclusion entitled them to free money rather than freeing me from financial obligation. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror that morning and saw someone I barely recognized. My eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep, my hair was disheveled from hours of restless pacing, and my face carried an expression of hurt that seemed carved in stone. But underneath the pain, something else was building, a cold anger that felt different from anything I had experienced before. This wasn't the hot rage of a moment. It was the steady burn of someone who had finally seen the truth about people she loved. I made coffee with hands that had stopped shaking and opened my laptop to begin researching something I never thought I would need: family law attorneys who specialized in financial fraud and emotional abuse cases. The search results were more extensive than I had expected, suggesting that my situation was far from unique. Support groups, legal resources, and counseling services for adults dealing with family financial manipulation filled my screen. As I read through articles about inheritance fraud, financial coercion, and family gaslighting, pieces of a larger puzzle began clicking into place. The pattern of exclusion hadn't started with Hawaii. It had been building for years through smaller incidents that I had dismissed as misunderstandings or coincidences. My phone buzzed with another message from Carla this time, including a photo of their hotel room overlooking the ocean. "This could have been your view if you weren't being so stubborn about paying your share. Last chance to make this right before we write you off completely." The threat was empty, but revealing. They needed my money more than they were willing to admit, which meant they were more vulnerable than they wanted me to know. I finished my coffee and made a decision that would change everything. The coffee had grown cold in my hands as I sat surrounded by printed emails, bank statements, and family photos that told a story I had been too naive to see. What I had initially dismissed as isolated incidents of thoughtlessness now formed a clear pattern of systematic exclusion and financial manipulation that stretched back years. I started with my grandmother's funeral 18 months ago. At the time, I had been hurt that Carla and my parents had made all the arrangements without consulting me, claiming they wanted to spare me the stress of planning during grief. They had chosen an expensive funeral home, upgraded the service package, and selected costly flowers and catering, then divided the bill 4 ways, including my portion. When I questioned some of the expenses, Carla had accused me of being selfish during our time of mourning and suggested that I didn't value grandmother's memory enough to give her a proper send-off. Shamed into compliance, I had paid my quarter of the bill without further protest. Now I could see the manipulation clearly. They had deliberately excluded me from decisions while ensuring I remained financially responsible for their choices. The pattern was identical to Hawaii exclude Helen from planning, make expensive decisions without her input, then demand payment while portraying any resistance as character flaws on my part. My laptop chimed with an email notification interrupting my investigation. The message was from a sender I didn't recognize, Jake Morrison, with the subject line, "Confusion about your family's Hawaii arrangements." I opened the email with growing confusion. "Hi, Helen. I hope this message finds you well. I'm the Uber driver who picked up your family from their house yesterday for their airport trip. During the ride, there was some discussion about you that left me feeling uncomfortable, and I think you should know what was said. Your sister Carla spent most of the drive complaining about how you always make family events difficult and expensive. She said you have a history of being unreliable and selfish, and that excluding you from the Hawaii trip was necessary for everyone else's peace of mind. Your mother agreed and added that you've been having emotional problems lately that make you inappropriate for family gatherings. Your father mentioned that you've been financially irresponsible and can't be trusted to contribute fairly to family expenses." I felt terrible listening to this conversation, especially since they continued talking about you for the entire 30-minute drive to the airport. They seemed to enjoy criticizing you, which struck me as mean-spirited regardless of any family issues. I got your email address from the pickup address information. I hope that's okay, because I felt you deserved to know how they were talking about you behind your back. I have 3 sisters myself, and I would want to know if my family was bad-mouthing me to strangers. I hope this information is helpful rather than hurtful. They seem to expect you to pay for their vacation expenses despite not being included, which doesn't seem fair to an outsider. Best wishes, Jake Morrison. The email hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they excluded me and demanded payment, but they had spent their drive to the airport systematically destroying my reputation to a stranger. Every lie they told Jake was probably being repeated to other people in their lives, building a narrative where I was the problem family member who deserved exclusion and criticism. I forwarded Jake's email to my evidence folder and continued digging through my records. The pattern became more disturbing with each discovery. Last Christmas, they had planned a family ski trip to Aspen without mentioning it to me until 2 days before departure. When I expressed hurt at being left out, Carla had claimed they assumed I wouldn't be interested because I had mentioned being busy with work during a phone call weeks earlier. They had demanded I pay for my share of the lodge rental, despite not using the space, arguing that my last-minute decision not to participate shouldn't penalize the rest of the family financially. The previous summer, they had organized a family reunion at my uncle's lake house in Michigan. I had learned about the gathering through a Facebook post from my cousin 2 days after it had concluded. When I asked why I hadn't been invited, Mom had claimed they forgot to add me to the planning group chat and suggested I was being overly sensitive about a simple oversight. Later, I received a request to pay for my share of the catered barbecue and boat rental because I was technically part of the guest count, even though you couldn't make it. Each incident followed the same script: exclude Helen from planning, make expensive decisions, demand financial contribution, gaslight any resistance by portraying Helen as difficult, unreliable, or selfish. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Jessica's name appeared on the screen. "Helen, I've been thinking about our conversation last night, and something doesn't add up." she said without preamble. I called Aunt Linda to chat about the Hawaii thing, and she mentioned that your mom told her a completely different story about why you're not there. My stomach dropped. What did she tell Linda? That you had gotten into a big fight with Carla about wedding planning expenses and stormed out of family activities. She said you've been holding a grudge and refusing to participate in family events for months. Another lie, another version of events designed to make me look like the aggressor. They weren't just excluding me. They were actively destroying my relationships with extended family by spreading different stories about my supposed bad behavior. Jessica, I haven't spoken to Carla about wedding planning in over a year. Her anniversary was last month and I sent a gift and card. I know, Jessica said quietly. That's why I'm calling. Something is really wrong here, Helen. The stories don't match and none of them sound like the person I know you to be. After hanging up with Jessica, I called Linda directly. Her version of events was even more damaging than Jessica had indicated. Helen, sweetheart, your mother is very worried about you, Linda said in the tone people use for discussing mental illness. She said you've been having some kind of breakdown and lashing out at family members. She mentioned that you've been making unreasonable financial demands and threatening legal action over imaginary grievances. Threatening legal action. They were already building a defense against the possibility that I might fight back, portraying any potential legal response as evidence of my instability, rather than a reasonable reaction to their abuse. Linda, has anyone in the family actually spoken to me in the past 6 months? Silence stretched across the line. Well, no, but your mother said you weren't taking calls or responding to messages. I've answered every call and responded to every message from family members. The only people I haven't been hearing from are the ones who are apparently spreading these stories about me. Oh, Linda said softly. Oh dear. I spent the next several hours making similar calls to aunts, uncles, and cousins. The web of lies was extensive and carefully crafted. Different relatives had been told different stories, but all the narratives painted me as unstable, selfish, or aggressive. Some had been told I was having financial difficulties and asking family for loans. Others heard that I was jealous of Carla's marriage and causing problems at family gatherings. The most sophisticated lie had been told to my Uncle Robert, who worked in mental health counseling. Mom had apparently called him seeking professional advice about how to handle a family member who was having paranoid episodes and making accusations about being excluded from family activities. Robert had offered to speak with me professionally, which Mom had declined, saying I wasn't ready to accept help. The manipulation was so thorough that my own family believed I was mentally ill rather than the victim of systematic abuse. They had created an entire alternative reality where my valid concerns were symptoms of psychological problems, and my hurt feelings were evidence of character defects. As evening approached, I sat surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy I never could have imagined. Phone records showing no missed calls from family members who claimed I wasn't responding. Email threads revealing my enthusiastic participation in Hawaii planning up until the day of departure. Bank statements documenting payment demands for events I had been excluded from. My phone buzzed with another message from Hawaii. This time, it was Dad. Helen, your behavior is affecting your mother's health. She's not eating and can barely enjoy the vacation because she's worried about you. Please consider how your actions impact other people. The final manipulation making me responsible for Mom's emotional state during the vacation, I wasn't allowed to join. Even their enjoyment of their betrayal was somehow my fault. I took a screenshot of Dad's message and added it to my evidence collection. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my laptop and began researching private investigators who specialized in family financial fraud. If my family wanted to play games with the truth, I would make sure I had all the facts before making my next move. The private investigator I contacted specialized in inheritance disputes and family financial crimes. During our phone consultation, she assured me that documentation of systematic exclusion, combined with financial demands, could constitute grounds for both civil and criminal action. Families who engage in this kind of behavior rarely limit it to one victim or one type of fraud, she explained. If they're comfortable lying to extended family about you, they're probably comfortable lying about other things too. Financial manipulation often involves multiple layers of deception. She was right to be thorough. What I discovered over the next several hours would reveal that Hawaii was just the tip of an iceberg that had been growing beneath my family's surface for years. The surprise I had promised them was going to be bigger than anything I had originally planned. The private investigator's name was Sarah Chen, and her office in downtown Phoenix looked more like a therapist's waiting room than what I had expected from someone who specialized in family financial crimes. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and strategically placed tissue boxes suggested she dealt with a lot of emotional devastation in her line of work. Family financial abuse is more common than people realize, Sarah explained as she reviewed the documentation I had brought. The emotional component often overshadows the financial crimes, making victims reluctant to pursue legal action. She spread my evidence across her desk like pieces of a puzzle, screenshots of payment, demands, email threads showing my exclusion from planning witness testimony from Jake the Uber driver, and documentation of the lies told to extended family members. What I'm seeing here suggests a pattern of systematic exclusion combined with financial exploitation. She continued making notes in a leather portfolio. But there's usually more to these cases than what appears on the surface. What do you mean? Families who are comfortable with this level of manipulation rarely limit themselves to vacation expenses. They often have their hands in larger financial pots that belong to other family members. My stomach clenched as I thought about grandmother's estate. Where would you suggest we start looking? Public records, estate documents, property transfers, business filings. If your family has been manipulating shared finances, there will be a paper trail. Sarah's assistant brought us coffee while she explained the investigation process. Within 72 hours, she would have a preliminary report on any financial irregularities involving my immediate family members. The cost was steep, but I had the Hawaii money sitting in my account with nowhere else to spend it. One more thing, Sarah said as I prepared to leave. Don't change your behavior patterns yet. If they suspect you're investigating, they might take steps to hide evidence or destroy documents. I drove home feeling like a character in someone else's story. 3 days ago, my biggest concern had been remembering to pack enough sunscreen. Now I was hiring investigators to uncover financial crimes committed by my own family. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from Hawaii. Carla had apparently decided to wage a social media campaign designed to make me look petty and unreasonable. Her latest Instagram story showed the family enjoying a sunset dinner with the caption, "When someone's negativity tries to ruin your joy, but you choose gratitude instead." The passive-aggressive messaging was so transparent, it would have been funny if it weren't so cruel. She was positioning herself as the victim of my negativity while enjoying the vacation I had been excluded from and billed for. Derek had posted a photo of their hotel room service breakfast with the caption, "Family time hits different when everyone present actually wants to be there." Everyone present, as if my absence were voluntary rather than imposed. But it was Mom's Facebook post that revealed the true depth of their manipulation. Praying for family members who are struggling with anger and resentment. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is space to work through their personal issues. Missing my daughter Helen, but respecting her need for distance during this difficult time in her life. The post had generated dozens of sympathetic comments from family, friends, and relatives. People were offering prayers for my healing and praising Mom's wisdom and patience in dealing with my apparent psychological breakdown. I screenshot the post and forwarded it to Sarah along with a text message, "The gaslighting campaign has gone public." Her response came back immediately, "This is helpful evidence. Save everything they post." Around midnight, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice asked, "Is this Helen Parker?" "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Diana Wells. I'm a paralegal with Morrison and Associates. We handle estate planning and inheritance disputes. I'm calling because your name has come up in some research we've been conducting." My blood turned to ice. "Research about what?" "Your grandmother's estate. There appear to be some discrepancies in the distribution documentation, and we wanted to verify some information with you. What kind of discrepancies? According to the original will, you were designated to receive a specific bequest of $15,000, plus a 1/3 interest in a rental property in Scottsdale. However, the final distribution documents show that you declined both inheritances in favor of having the assets transferred to your sister Carla. The room started spinning around me. I never declined anything. I was never even told about a property. That's what we were afraid of, Diana said quietly. Can you come in tomorrow morning? We need to discuss some documents that appear to have your signature but may not be legitimate. After Diana hung up, I sat in my dark apartment staring at the wall until sunrise. $15,000 in property ownership. Assets that should have been mine apparently signed away without my knowledge or consent. When Sarah called the next morning, her voice carried a tension that made my stomach clench. Helen, we need to meet immediately. What I've found is bigger than vacation expenses. Her office felt different when I returned, more like a war room than a therapy space. Documents covered every available surface, and Sarah's assistant was manning 2 laptops simultaneously. Your family has been very busy, Sarah said without preamble. The rental property your grandmother left you is currently generating about $1,800 per month in rental income. That's $21,600 per year that has been going to your sister instead of being split 3 ways among the grandchildren. She handed me a folder thick with photocopied documents. The property deed shows your name was removed and replaced with Carla's name approximately 18 months ago, right around the time of your grandmother's funeral, when I was too grief-stricken to pay attention to paperwork. Exactly. They used your emotional state to manipulate you into signing documents you probably didn't fully understand. The next document she showed me made my hands shake. It was a notarized form bearing my signature stating that I voluntarily relinquished all claims to grandmother's rental property and additional cash bequest in favor of consolidating the estate assets with my sister. I never signed this, I whispered, staring at handwriting that looked like mine but felt foreign. The notary stamp is from Derek's insurance office, Sarah's assistant added. He notarized the document himself, which creates some interesting legal questions about conflict of interest and potential fraud. Derek notarized a document that transferred my inheritance to his wife. It gets worse, Sarah continued. The property has been used as collateral for 2 separate loans totaling $47,000. If those loans default, the property could be seized, which would eliminate any remaining asset value. My inheritance hadn't just been stolen, it had been leveraged for additional debt that put the original asset at risk. What about the cash bequest? That money was used as the down payment for Carla and Derek's house. According to the mortgage documents, they purchased their home with a down payment of exactly $15,000, which matches the amount of your inheritance. I was staring at evidence that my family had systematically robbed me of my grandmother's gifts and used that money to finance their own lifestyle improvements. The rental property that should have been providing me with passive income was instead paying for their mortgage, and the cash that could have changed my financial situation had become equity in their home. Can we prove the signatures were forged? We're working on that. I've contacted a handwriting expert who specializes in inheritance fraud cases. But even if the signatures are legitimate, the circumstances surrounding the signing suggest coercion and misrepresentation. Sarah pulled out another document that made my vision blur with rage. It was an email thread between Carla and a real estate attorney dated just 2 weeks after grandmother's funeral. Carla wrote to the attorney asking about the quickest way to consolidate Helen's inheritance interests before she has time to think about it too much. The attorney responded with step-by-step instructions for getting you to sign away your rights while you were still emotionally vulnerable. She planned this before I even finished grieving. It appears that way. The attorney's email specifically mentions taking advantage of your emotional state and tendency to defer to family authority to accomplish the transfer. The cold calculation behind their theft was more devastating than the financial loss itself. They had weaponized my grief and my trust in family to rob me of assets that could have changed my life. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, hesitating before handing me the final document. "The Hawaii vacation was paid for entirely with rental income from your property. The villa, the flights, the activities, everything. They used money that should have been partly yours to fund a vacation you weren't allowed to join." The perfection of their cruelty was breathtaking. They had stolen my inheritance, used it to pay for a family vacation, excluded me from that vacation, then demanded that I pay additional money to cover expenses they had already funded with my stolen assets. What are our options? Civil litigation for inheritance fraud, criminal charges for forgery and theft, and immediate action to freeze the property assets before they can be further leveraged or sold. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "That was my contact at the courthouse. Carla just filed paperwork this morning to refinance the rental property with a much larger loan amount. They're trying to extract maximum equity before anything can be challenged." "Can they do that?" "Not if we act fast. I'm calling the judge's emergency line right now to request an immediate asset freeze." As Sarah made her calls, I sat surrounded by evidence of betrayal so complete it felt like discovering that gravity worked backward. Every assumption I had made about my family's basic decency had been systematically dismantled by documents bearing official seals and legal stamps. My phone buzzed with another message from Hawaii, this one from Dad. "Helen, we're having such a wonderful time here. The weather is perfect and we're making memories that will last a lifetime. I hope you're using this time alone to reflect on what's truly important in relationships." What's truly important in relationships? Like honesty, trust, and not stealing someone's inheritance to pay for vacations they're excluded from. I screenshot Dad's message and added it to my evidence file. Every word they sent me now felt like additional proof of their calculated cruelty. "Good news," Sarah announced as she hung up her phone. "Judge Martinez has issued a temporary restraining order freezing all assets related to your grandmother's estate, pending a full investigation. Carla's refinancing attempt has been blocked. What happens now? Now we gather more evidence, file formal charges, and prepare for your family to discover that their victim isn't as helpless as they assumed." The surprise I had promised them was about to become much bigger than a single dollar payment. They had spent years stealing from me while making me believe I was the problem in the relationship. It was time for them to learn what real consequences looked like. The emergency court hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, which gave me exactly 4 days to prepare for legal warfare against my own family while they lounged on beaches funded by my stolen inheritance. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so personally devastating. Sarah recommended that I maintain normal communication patterns to avoid alerting them to our investigation. "Let them enjoy their vacation," she advised. "Overconfident criminals make more mistakes." But maintaining normalcy felt impossible when every message from Hawaii felt like salt being poured into open wounds. Carla's latest Instagram story showed her getting a spa treatment with the caption, "Self-Care Sunday because some people's drama can't touch your peace." My drama. She was literally being pampered with money stolen from my inheritance while characterizing my reaction to their theft as drama. Derek had posted a video of them parasailing with the soundtrack, "Living My Best Life." The comments were full of family friends praising their well-deserved vacation and asking when I would be joining them. Cousin Jessica had apparently seen the posts and commented, "Where's Helen? I thought this was supposed to be a family trip." Carla's response was swift and calculated. Helen chose to focus on her career instead. We're respecting her decision to prioritize work over family time. Another lie crafted to make me look like the workaholic who valued money over relationships. The narrative was so consistent across their posts that they had clearly coordinated their messaging strategy. Mom's Facebook updates were particularly sophisticated in their manipulation. Her latest post included a photo of the family at dinner with the caption, "Grateful for children who understand that family love means supporting each other's choices, even when those choices involve sacrifice and distance." Supporting each other's choices, as if my exclusion were a choice I had made rather than a betrayal they had orchestrated. The comments on Mom's post revealed how successfully they had manipulated our extended family's perception of the situation. Aunt Linda wrote, "Sandra, you're such a wise mother to give Helen space to work through her issues." Uncle Robert added, "Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step back and let someone find their own path." They had turned my victimization into my choice, my exclusion into my preference, my hurt into my character flaw. The gaslighting was so complete that even sympathetic relatives were congratulating my family for respecting boundaries I had never established. But their social media campaign also provided valuable evidence for our case. Every post about their vacation being funded by the rental property income created documentation of their use of stolen assets. Sarah's team was systematically screenshotting and cataloging each update. "They're building our case for us," Sarah observed during one of our daily check-ins. "Criminals who flaunt their crimes on social media make prosecutors very happy." Meanwhile, my own investigation was revealing additional layers of their deception. I spent Tuesday evening going through old financial documents and found 3 separate occasions when I had been charged for family expenses related to events I hadn't attended. Last year's Mother's Day brunch at an expensive restaurant where they had ordered champagne and upgraded to the premium menu, then split the bill 5 ways, including my portion despite my being out of town for work. When I questioned the charge, Carla had insisted that family celebrations are everyone's responsibility regardless of attendance. The previous Christmas, they had hired a professional photographer for family portraits at my parents' house. I had been working that day and couldn't attend the session, but they had charged me $200 for Helen's share of photography costs. When I asked why I owed money for photos I wasn't in, Derek had explained that the photographer's fee was based on family size and you're part of the family even when you can't participate. Most revealing was a charge from 2 years ago for Dad's 60th birthday party. They had rented a private dining room at his favorite steakhouse and invited 20 people for a celebration I hadn't been told about until the day before. Unable to attend on such short notice, I had sent a thoughtful gift and handwritten card. 2 weeks later, Carla had sent me a payment request for $350 as Helen's portion of Dad's birthday dinner expenses. The pattern was clear and consistent: exclude Helen from planning, make expensive decisions without her input, then demand payment while portraying any resistance as selfishness or family disloyalty. Wednesday brought a breakthrough that changed everything. Sarah called me at work with barely contained excitement in her voice. "Helen, you need to sit down. We found something that makes the inheritance theft look small." I closed my office door and prepared for another devastating revelation. Your grandmother's estate included more than just the rental property and cash bequest. There was also a life insurance policy with a death benefit of $75,000, with you listed as one of 3 equal beneficiaries. My legs felt weak. I was never told about any life insurance. Because you were never supposed to find out about it. The beneficiary distribution should have been $25,000 each to you, Carla, and your parents. Instead, the full $75,000 was paid to Carla as the sole surviving beneficiary. How is that possible? Someone submitted a death certificate for you along with the insurance claim declaring you deceased and therefore ineligible to receive benefits. The words didn't make sense at first. They declared me dead. According to the insurance company's records, Helen Parker died in a car accident 6 months before your grandmother's death. The death certificate appears to be a sophisticated forgery, complete with official seals and signatures. I was staring at evidence that my family had literally killed me off on paper to steal my insurance benefits. The theft of my inheritance was criminal, but this was something approaching evil. Who filed the fraudulent death certificate? Derek, in his capacity as the family's insurance agent. He had professional access to the forms and procedures necessary to create convincing documentation. Derek had used his professional credentials and industry knowledge to forge my death certificate and steal $75,000 from my grandmother's life insurance policy. The man who called me dramatic for objecting to vacation expenses had committed multiple felonies to rob me of benefits that would have changed my financial life completely. Sarah, how much money are we talking about in total? Between the rental property income, the stolen cash bequest, the fraudulent insurance claim, and the various expense manipulations we've documented, you've been defrauded of approximately $137,000 over the past 18 months. $137,000. More money than I had ever imagined having stolen by people who portrayed themselves as loving family members concerned about my emotional well-being. What's our next move? Criminal charges for insurance fraud, forgery, and theft, civil litigation for damages and emotional distress, an immediate asset seizure to prevent them from hiding or spending any more of your money. Thursday brought the most satisfying phone call of my life. Sarah contacted me with an update that made me smile for the first time since this nightmare had begun. The FBI has taken over the insurance fraud investigation. Derek's professional licenses are being suspended pending criminal proceedings, and all of their bank accounts have been frozen. They're in Hawaii with frozen bank accounts. As of this morning, yes. They'll discover the account freezes when they try to pay for meals activities or their hotel checkout. The timing was perfect. They would spend their final days in paradise discovering that their access to stolen money had been cut off, leaving them stranded with expenses they couldn't pay and questions they couldn't answer. There's more, Sarah continued. The hotel where they're staying called this morning asking about payment guarantees. Apparently, their credit cards are being declined, and they're requesting alternative payment methods for their remaining charges. My family was about to discover that crime doesn't pay literally. Their vacation funded by stolen assets was turning into a financial nightmare that would follow them home and into courtrooms. But I wasn't finished with them yet. If they wanted to play games with truth and perception, I was prepared to show them what real strategy looked like. I opened my laptop and began booking travel arrangements that would turn their paradise into a confrontation they would never forget. The surprise I had promised them was about to arrive in person. The first-class seat to Honolulu had cost me nearly $3,000, but it felt like the best money I had ever spent. As the plane descended toward the Hawaiian Islands, I reviewed the legal documents Sarah had prepared for our confrontation. Restraining orders, asset seizure notices, and criminal complaints that would transform their vacation from paradise into a legal nightmare. Sarah had initially advised against the trip. Let law enforcement handle the confrontation, she had suggested. Flying to Hawaii to confront them could be seen as harassment. But I needed to see their faces when the truth finally caught up with them. After months of lies, manipulation, and theft, they deserved to experience the shock of discovery in the paradise they had purchased with my stolen inheritance. The resort where they were staying was a luxury property on Maui's western shore, the kind of place that charged $500 per night for ocean view rooms. I had booked myself into the presidential suite using money from my secret savings account, the one I had been building since discovering their pattern of financial manipulation. The irony was perfect. While they struggled with frozen accounts and declined credit cards, I would be staying in the most expensive accommodation the resort offered. My taxi driver was Chatty, a local man named David, who seemed genuinely interested in my story when I mentioned that I was surprising family members who thought I couldn't afford to visit Hawaii. Family can be complicated, he observed as we wound through tropical landscapes that looked like postcards. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. His words carried the wisdom of someone who had probably seen plenty of family drama during his years driving tourists around paradise. The resort was even more spectacular than the photos had suggested. Manicured gardens, infinity pools, and private beaches that stretched toward horizons painted in shades of turquoise. This was the vacation I had helped plan but been excluded from the paradise they had purchased with money stolen from my inheritance. The front desk manager, a professional woman named Patricia, greeted me with the kind of warmth reserved for guests staying in premium suites, but her expression shifted when I mentioned my family members who were already guests at the resort. "The Parker family," she said, carefully checking her computer screen. "Yes, they're staying in one of our standard rooms. There have been some payment issues with their account." "What kind of payment issues?" Patricia glanced around to ensure our conversation remained private. "Their credit cards have been declining since this morning. They've been asking about alternative payment arrangements and seem quite stressed about the situation." Perfect. Their financial crimes were catching up with them in real time, creating exactly the kind of pressure I needed for maximum impact. "They also filed some complaints yesterday about a potential harassment situation," Patricia continued. "They claimed that a family member with mental health issues might attempt to contact them inappropriately during their vacation. The lies had followed them to Hawaii. Even here in paradise, they were preemptively portraying me as unstable and threatening to justify whatever reaction they might have to my presence." "I see," I said calmly. "Did they provide any specific information about this allegedly unstable family member?" "They described someone who has been making unreasonable financial demands and exhibiting erratic behavior. They requested that hotel security be alerted if anyone matching the description attempted to contact them." Patricia's professional demeanor couldn't quite hide her discomfort with the situation. Apparently, my family's paranoid lies had created awkwardness with the resort staff. "That's interesting," I said, handing her my identification and reservation confirmation. "I'm Helen Parker, the allegedly unstable family member they've been warning you about. As you can see, I'm a legitimate guest who has paid for the presidential suite, and I have no criminal record or history of harassment." Patricia's eyes widened as she processed this information. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. We had no way of knowing that their complaints were not accurate." "No apology necessary. But I thought you should know that the guests who have been making financial excuses and spreading stories about harassment are apparently comfortable lying to resort staff about family members." "This is very helpful information," Patricia said diplomatically. "We appreciate guests who help us understand complex situations." She upgraded my welcome amenities and assigned me a personal concierge, apparently recognizing that the real problem guests were the ones who couldn't pay their bills rather than the one who had booked the presidential suite. I spent the first hour in my suite reviewing the legal documents one final time and preparing for the confrontation that would change everything. The view from my balcony encompassed the entire resort, including the pool area where I could see 4 familiar figures lounging in chairs that would soon become very uncomfortable. Sarah called as I was getting ready to make my appearance. "Helen, the FBI wants to coordinate the timing of your confrontation with their evidence collection. Can you wait until tomorrow morning to approach them?" "How long do I need to wait?" "Just until they attempt to check out. Federal agents will be there to arrest Derek when he tries to dispute the credit card declines with resort management." The timing was perfect. They would spend their final night in paradise knowing that their financial crimes had been discovered, then face arrest in front of other resort guests and staff members. "What about Carla and my parents?" "They'll be arrested as accessories after Derek's initial charges are filed. The evidence of their participation in the inheritance fraud is overwhelming." I spent the evening preparing for the confrontation, ordering room service from the resort's premium restaurant and watching the sunset from my private balcony. Somewhere below me, my family was probably struggling to pay for dinner while making excuses about credit card problems. The irony was exquisite. I was dining on lobster and champagne in the presidential suite while they scraped together cash to cover basic expenses at the resort they had purchased with my stolen money. Around 9 o'clock, I received a text message from Carla. "Helen, we don't know what kind of legal nonsense you've been playing with, but our accounts are frozen and we're stuck in Hawaii until we can resolve this ridiculous situation. Your vindictive behavior is ruining our family vacation." Vindictive behavior. She was characterizing the recovery of my stolen assets as vindictiveness rather than justice. I sent back a simple response. I'm sure everything will work out exactly as it should. Her reply came immediately. What is that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, I turned off my phone and prepared for the performance of a lifetime. Tomorrow morning, they would discover that their victim had become their prosecutor and their paradise had become their courtroom. The surprise I had promised them was about to exceed their worst nightmares. The resort pool area was exactly as beautiful as I had imagined during months of planning this vacation, with crystal blue water, reflecting palm trees and tropical flowers that seemed too perfect to be real. The morning sun painted everything in golden light that should have felt peaceful, but instead felt like stage lighting for the drama about to unfold. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a flowing white sundress that photographed well in designer sunglasses that would hide my emotions during the confrontation. If this moment was going to be documented, I wanted to look composed and confident rather than vengeful or unhinged. My family's location was easy to identify. They were huddled around a table near the shallow end, their voices carrying across the water as they engaged in what appeared to be an intense financial discussion. Even from a distance, their body language suggested stress and frustration that contrasted sharply with the relaxed atmosphere of other guests. I ordered a tropical drink from the poolside bar and asked the bartender to add extra garnish. Make it look Instagram-worthy, I requested. I want to celebrate something special. As I approached their table, drink in hand and smile on my face, I could hear fragments of their conversation that confirmed everything Sarah had predicted. The bank says it's a federal investigation, Derek was saying in a voice tight with panic. They won't give me any details, but all our accounts are frozen pending some kind of review. This has to be connected to Helen's legal threats, Carla replied. She's probably filed some frivolous lawsuit trying to get attention and money. Dad was studying a hotel bill with the focused intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible math problem. We need to find a way to pay for checkout tomorrow. The hotel is demanding a different credit card or cash payment. Maybe we can call Uncle Robert for a loan, Mom suggested. He has money set aside for emergencies. Uncle Robert, who thought I was having paranoid episodes about being excluded from family activities. The irony was perfect. I took a deep breath and walked directly to their table, my sandals clicking against the pool deck with each confident step. Good morning, family, I said brightly, setting my drink down on their table with a gentle clink that made all four of them look up simultaneously. Derek's reaction was immediate and dramatic. He had been mid-sip of what appeared to be coffee, and the shock of seeing me caused him to inhale rather than swallow. The choking sound that resulted was loud enough to attract attention from nearby guests, followed by violent coughing that turned his face red. Carla's response was even more spectacular. She let out a scream that started low and built to a volume that could probably be heard 3 floors up in the hotel rooms. Other guests turned to stare, some reaching for their phones to record what appeared to be a medical emergency. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked, her voice cracking on the higher notes. "How did you find us? Are you stalking us?" Mom immediately started making hushing gestures, apparently aware that Carla's volume was creating a scene that would be difficult to explain to other guests. "Helen, sweetheart, what a surprise to see you here." "Is it?" I asked, maintaining my bright tone while settling into an empty chair at their table. Because I distinctly remember being told this was a family vacation. I'm family, so here I am. Dad was staring at me with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "How did you afford to come to Hawaii? I thought you were having financial difficulties." "Financial difficulties," I repeated thoughtfully. "That's interesting, Dad. What gave you the impression I was struggling with money?" The silence that followed was broken by the sound of resort security approaching our table. 2 uniformed officers had apparently been summoned by the commotion of Carla's screaming. "Is everything all right here?" The older officer asked, his attention focused on Carla, who was still breathing heavily from her dramatic reaction. "These guests have been making complaints about harassment," the younger officer added, consulting a small notebook. "Ma'am, are you the family member they've been concerned about?" I handed him my room key and identification. I'm Helen Parker, staying in the presidential suite. These are my family members who appear to be surprised by my presence at a resort where I'm a legitimate paying guest. The officers exchange glances as they process this information. Clearly, my family's previous complaints about a potentially dangerous relative didn't align with the composed woman in designer clothing who was staying in the resort's most expensive accommodation. Actually, the older officer said, consulting his own notes, "We've been asked to monitor this family for payment disputes with the hotel. Their credit cards have been declining, and management is concerned about their ability to settle their account." The humiliation was perfect. Instead of rescuing my family from harassment by a mentally unstable relative, security was revealing their financial problems to other guests and questioning their ability to pay for their vacation. "Payment disputes," I said thoughtfully, loud enough for nearby guests to overhear. "That sounds stressful. I hope it doesn't interfere with your enjoyment of this beautiful resort." Derek found his voice, though it was still hoarse from his choking episode. "Helen, whatever legal problems you've created for us, we can resolve this like adults when we get home." "Legal problems I've created," I repeated slowly. "Derek, that's a fascinating perspective. What legal problems do you think I've created?" Carla was frantically texting someone, probably trying to contact a lawyer or bank representative who could explain their frozen accounts. "You've obviously filed some kind of fraudulent complaint to freeze our assets. This is financial harassment." "Financial harassment?" I mused, taking a sip of my tropical drink. "Help me understand that term, Carla. Is that when someone demands payment for vacations they're excluded from, or when someone steals inheritance money to fund family trips?" The color drained from Dad's face. "Helen, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about grandmother's rental property that I was supposed to inherit a third of, but somehow ended up entirely in Carla's name. I'm talking about the $15,000 cash bequest that became the down payment for Derek and Carla's house. I'm talking about the $75,000 life insurance policy that was paid to Carla as the sole surviving beneficiary, after someone filed a death certificate claiming I had died in a car accident." My voice remained calm and pleasant, but the words landed like explosions at their table. Other guests were now openly listening to our conversation, their own discussions forgotten in favor of what sounded like a real-life crime drama unfolding over morning cocktails. Mom's hands started shaking. "That's impossible. You signed the paperwork voluntarily. You said you didn't want the responsibility of property management." "Show me the paperwork, Mom. Show me my signature on documents I supposedly signed voluntarily." The security officers were now taking notes, apparently recognizing that this conversation involved potential criminal activity rather than simple family dysfunction. "Ma'am," the older officer said to me, "do you have documentation of these financial claims?" I reached into my beach bag and pulled out a folder containing copies of the most damaging evidence: bank records, property transfers, insurance claims, and forensic analysis of allegedly forged signatures. As I spread the documents across their table, my family's expressions shifted from confusion to horror to desperate panic. The evidence was comprehensive and undeniable, transforming their tropical paradise into a prosecutor's exhibit hall. "This is all legal paperwork," I continued in the same pleasant tone. "Filed with proper authorities, investigated by qualified professionals, and documented by federal agents who are very interested in cases involving inheritance fraud and insurance crimes." Derek was now visibly sweating despite the comfortable morning temperature. "Those documents are taken out of context. Everything we did was legal and properly documented." "Including filing a fraudulent death certificate to steal my insurance benefits?" I asked brightly, because the FBI has some questions about that particular document, Derek. Something about using your professional credentials to forge official death records. The mention of federal agents caused a ripple of excitement among the eavesdropping guests. Several people were now openly recording our conversation with their phones, apparently recognizing that they were witnessing something more dramatic than typical vacation entertainment. Carla was crying now, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streaks down her cheeks. "Helen, please, we can work this out. Family doesn't destroy family over money. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Family doesn't steal inheritance money to fund vacations that exclude other family members. Family doesn't forge death certificates to claim insurance benefits. Family doesn't spread lies about mental health issues to justify financial crimes. The resort manager approached our table Patricia from the front desk, walking beside him with an expression of professional concern. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, the manager said formally, we need to discuss the outstanding balance on your account. Your payment methods are being declined, and we require immediate resolution before your checkout tomorrow. We're working on it, Derek said desperately. There's been a misunderstanding with our bank. A federal investigation isn't a misunderstanding, I said helpfully. It's usually the result of criminal activity being discovered by law enforcement agencies. The manager's eyebrows rose. Federal investigation. Inheritance fraud, insurance fraud, and forgery, I explained cheerfully. The kind of crimes that result in asset freezes while prosecutors build their cases. Patricia stepped forward with a tablet in her hands. Sir, we've received a call from federal agents requesting that we preserve all records related to your stay. Apparently, this resort visit is being funded by assets connected to criminal activity. They bought this vacation with money stolen from my grandmother's estate. I added in case anyone was confused about the connection. The crowd of onlookers was growing larger, with guests abandoning their own poolside activities to watch what had become the most entertaining event of their vacation. Several people were live streaming the confrontation, apparently recognizing that they were witnessing something worth sharing with the internet. Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete. We don't have to listen to this. We're legitimate guests at this resort. Legitimate guests who can't pay their bills, the security officer observed, and who appear to be involved in federal criminal investigations. Sir, the manager added, we're going to need you to return to your room while we contact the appropriate authorities about this situation. As my family was escorted away by security, I remained at their table, finishing my tropical drink and reviewing the legal documents that had transformed their paradise into a crime scene. Other guests approached me with expressions of amazement and sympathy. A woman from Minnesota bought me another drink. A retired couple from Texas offered to serve as witnesses if I needed testimony about the confrontation. The surprise I had promised them was exceeding even my expectations. By tomorrow morning, their arrest would be the talk of the resort, and their criminal behavior would be documented by dozens of witnesses who had captured everything on video. Justice served poolside with a tropical garnish tasted better than I had ever imagined. The Resort Business Center had become my temporary war room, complete with high-speed internet, a printer, and enough privacy to coordinate the final phase of my family's downfall. Sarah was on speakerphone, walking me through the legal documentation that would transform their Hawaiian nightmare into a federal case. The FBI agents will arrive at the resort this afternoon, she explained. They want to coordinate Derek's arrest with the local authorities to ensure everything is properly documented. What about the others? Carla will be arrested as an accessory to the insurance fraud. Your parents are being charged as co-conspirators in the inheritance theft. All 4 of them will be extradited back to Arizona to face the charges there. I was taking notes on resort stationery, the tropical letterhead providing surreal contrast to the criminal charges being outlined. How solid is our case? Overwhelming. The handwriting analysis confirmed that your signatures were forged on the inheritance documents. The insurance company has provided full cooperation since discovering the fraudulent death certificate, and Derek's professional licenses give us clear evidence of his ability to create convincing forgeries. Through the business center windows, I could see hotel security maintaining a discreet presence near the pool area, where other guests were still discussing the morning's confrontation. Several people had approached me throughout the day, sharing their own stories of family financial abuse and expressing support for my decision to pursue justice. There's something else, Sarah continued. The local FBI office has been investigating Derek's insurance practice for months. Apparently, you're not the only client who has experienced suspicious claim handling and document irregularities. He's done this to other people. Multiple clients have reported similar issues with inheritance claims, beneficiary distributions, and policy documentation. Your case is the one that finally gave them enough evidence to move forward with charges. The scope of Derek's crimes was expanding beyond my family's theft into a pattern of professional misconduct that had victimized numerous clients. My decision to fight back was apparently exposing a much larger criminal enterprise. Patricia knocked on the business center door, her expression mixing professional courtesy with genuine concern. "Ms. Parker, there are federal agents here to speak with you. They're in the executive conference room whenever you're ready." The FBI agents were exactly what I had expected from television shows, serious, well-dressed, and carrying briefcases that probably contained enough evidence to send my family to prison. Agent Martinez was a woman in her 40s, with the kind of calm confidence that suggested extensive experience with white-collar crime. Agent Thompson was younger, with a laptop and multiple phones that kept buzzing with updates. "Ms. Parker." Agent Martinez began, "We appreciate your cooperation in this investigation. The evidence you've provided has been instrumental in building our case against your family members. What happens next? We'll arrest Derek this afternoon when he attempts to dispute the hotel charges with management. Carla will be arrested simultaneously to prevent her from destroying evidence or contacting accomplices. Your parents will be taken into custody tomorrow morning." Agent Thompson looked up from his laptop. "We've also executed search warrants for their homes and offices. Derek's insurance files contain evidence of fraud involving at least 12 other clients over the past 3 years. 12 other clients, inheritance disputes, beneficiary changes, policy modifications, suspicious death claims. Your brother-in-law has been very busy using his professional access to manipulate insurance paperwork for personal gain." The magnitude of Derek's crimes was staggering. My family's theft of my inheritance was just one example of a systematic pattern of insurance fraud that had been operating for years. "What about the money?" "Full restitution plus damages," Agent Martinez assured me. "The rental property will be transferred back to your name. The insurance money will be recovered with interest, and you'll receive compensation for the emotional distress and legal expenses." Through the conference room windows, I could see my family gathering near the hotel check-in desk, apparently attempting to resolve their payment issues with increasingly desperate explanations. Derek was gesturing emphatically, while Carla held her phone to her ear, probably trying to contact lawyers or bank representatives who couldn't help them. "They still don't understand what's happening," I observed. "That's common in white-collar crime cases," Agent Thompson explained. "Criminals often believe they can talk their way out of consequences until the handcuffs actually appear." Agent Martinez opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "These are the formal charges being filed against each family member. We'll need you to review and sign the victim impact statements." Reading through the charges was like reviewing a catalog of betrayal conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud, insurance fraud, forgery, grand theft, elder abuse, and racketeering. Each charge carried potential sentences ranging from several years to several decades in federal prison. Elder abuse. Your grandmother's estate was manipulated while she was still alive but mentally compromised, Agent Martinez explained. Derek convinced her to change beneficiary designations and property transfers during the final months of her life, when she was receiving hospice care. Even in death, grandmother had been victimized by their greed. They had manipulated a dying woman to steal from her grandchildren, showing a level of callousness that exceeded anything I had previously imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Helen, federal agents are asking the hotel about our stay. Whatever lies you've told them, we can clear this up if you just talk to us reasonably." Lies. He was still characterizing documented evidence of their crimes as lies, apparently believing that the right conversation could make federal investigations disappear. I showed the message to Agent Martinez, who smiled grimly. He'll be saying the same thing during his interrogation this afternoon, right up until we show him the forensic evidence of his signature forgeries. Can I watch the arrests? We'd prefer that you maintain distance for safety reasons, Agent Thompson said, but the arrests will be well documented, and you'll receive copies of all relevant footage. Through the windows, I could see hotel security approaching my family's location. The arrests were beginning transforming their luxury vacation into a very public legal nightmare that would follow them for years. My phone buzzed again this time with a call from Mom. I answered on speakerphone so the agents could hear the conversation. "Helen, sweetheart, there are police officers here asking about some kind of investigation. Can you please explain what's going on?" "I'm recovering the money you stole from me," I said calmly. "The inheritance money, the insurance money, and the rental property income that should have been mine." "We didn't steal anything," Mom said desperately. "Those were legal transfers that you agreed to." "Show them the paperwork with my actual signature," I suggested. "Show them the documents I supposedly signed voluntarily." Silence stretched across the connection, broken by the sound of voices in the background, giving what sounded like legal warnings about the right to remain silent. "Helen, please don't do this to your family," Mom whispered. "We love you." "People who love me don't steal my inheritance and exclude me from family vacations," I replied. "People who love me don't spread lies about my mental health to justify financial crimes." The call ended abruptly, probably because Mom was being handcuffed and read her rights by federal agents who had tracked down every dollar of my stolen inheritance. Agent Martinez closed her briefcase with the finality of someone whose job was nearly complete. "Ms. Parker, you should be very proud of your courage in pursuing this case. Family financial abuse often goes unreported because victims are too emotionally attached to hold their relatives accountable." "What about the other victims of Derek's insurance fraud?" "They'll be contacted as our investigation expands. Your decision to fight back has probably prevented dozens of other families from being victimized by the same criminal enterprise." As the agents prepared to leave for the arrests, I remained in the conference room watching my family's vacation transform into the first day of their criminal prosecution. The surprise I had promised them was delivering justice on a scale that exceeded everything I had originally planned. Tomorrow they would wake up in federal custody while I enjoyed my final day in the paradise they had purchased with my stolen money. The reversal was complete, and the lesson was clear. Families who steal from their own members eventually discover that love and blood relationships provide no protection against the consequences of criminal behavior. Justice had arrived in paradise, and it was more beautiful than any sunset I had ever seen. The federal holding facility in Honolulu was a stark concrete building that looked nothing like the tropical paradise surrounding it. I sat in a sterile conference room across from Agent Martinez, watching through one-way glass as Derek underwent his initial interrogation. The contrast between his confident demeanor from this morning and his current panicked state was remarkable. "He's still maintaining that all the documents are legitimate," Agent Martinez observed, checking her notes from the first 2 hours of questioning, even when confronted with forensic evidence of forgery. On the table between us lay dozens of documents that told the complete story of my family's criminal enterprise. Bank records, insurance files, property transfers, and communications that revealed the sophisticated planning behind their theft. "Show me the phone recordings," I said, steeling myself for what I knew would be painful evidence. Agent Thompson opened his laptop and played the first recording. It was a conversation between Carla and Derek from 6 months ago, captured by court-authorized wiretaps on Derek's business phone. "Helen is asking too many questions about grandmother's estate," Carla's voice said clearly through the speakers. She called the lawyer, asking about property distributions and inheritance timelines. "I'll handle it," Derek replied. "The death certificate paperwork is already filed with the insurance company. Even if she discovers the property transfer, she can't prove the signatures were forged without expensive forensic analysis. What if she gets suspicious enough to hire a lawyer? Then we accelerate the timeline. refinance the property to extract maximum equity before she can file any legal challenges. By the time she figures out what happened, the money will be spent and untraceable. The casual cruelty in their voices was devastating. They were discussing my financial destruction like a business transaction, calculating how to steal maximum assets while minimizing their risk of detection. The next recording was even worse, a three-way call between Carla, Derek, and my mother from 3 months ago. Helen keeps asking about being included in family vacation planning, Mom's voice said with obvious irritation. She's acting like she expects to be invited to Hawaii. Perfect, Carla responded. Let her plan the whole trip, then exclude her at the last minute. Use the emotional shock to keep her distracted from the property investigation. That seems cruel, Mom said hesitantly. It's strategic, Derek corrected. If she's dealing with family rejection trauma, she won't have emotional energy to pursue legal action about the inheritance. We can even bill her for vacation expenses to add financial pressure. Brilliant, Carla agreed. Make her pay for the vacation she's not allowed to join. The rental property income will cover the actual costs, so we're essentially getting free money from Helen while enjoying a family trip without her drama. I had to pause the recording and step outside for fresh air. Hearing them plot my emotional destruction while planning to bill me for their betrayal was more painful than any physical assault could have been. When I returned to the conference room, Agent Martinez had arranged additional evidence on the table. These are text message exchanges between your family members during the weeks leading up to your Hawaii confrontation. They document the lies they told extended family about your absence. The messages were a masterclass in reputation destruction. Carla to Aunt Linda. Helen is having some kind of breakdown. She's making paranoid accusations about family finances and threatening legal action over imaginary grievances. We're worried about her mental state. Derek to Uncle Robert. Helen has been exhibiting signs of persecution complex and financial desperation. She's demanding money from family members and claiming we've stolen from her. As a mental health professional, do you have advice for handling delusional relatives? Mom to various cousins. Helen chose not to join us for Hawaii because she's going through personal issues that make family time too stressful. We're respecting her need for space while praying for her healing. The coordination was sophisticated and deliberate. They had crafted different lies for different relatives, building a network of false narratives that portrayed me as mentally unstable, financially desperate, and voluntarily isolated from family activities. How many people did they contact with these lies? I asked. Agent Thompson consulted his laptop. 17 family members, 12 family friends, and at least 6 professional contacts, including your uncle's counseling colleagues and your parents' neighbors. 17 family members. They had systematically destroyed my reputation with nearly every relative I cared about, ensuring that any attempt I made to expose their crimes would be dismissed as evidence of mental illness. There's more, Agent Martinez said, pulling out another folder. These are social media communications where they discuss strategies for managing public perception of your absence. Carla's private messages to Derek revealed the sophistication of their manipulation campaign. We need to be consistent about Helen's personal issues story. If anyone asks directly about her absence, emphasize her choice to stay home rather than our decision to exclude her. Make it sound like we're being supportive of her need for space. What about the payment requests? Frame them as family financial obligations that she's avoiding due to her emotional problems. If she refuses to pay it, proves she's being selfish and unstable. And if she shows up in Hawaii unexpectedly, document everything. Record her behavior, get witnesses, make it look like harassment and stalking. We'll have evidence of her unhinged behavior to justify everything we've said about her mental state. They had planned for my arrival in Hawaii, preparing to use my justified anger as evidence of psychological problems that would discredit any accusations I made about their financial crimes. The recording equipment had captured their phone conversation from yesterday morning after discovering their frozen bank accounts. Helen has definitely filed some kind of legal action, Derek said, his voice tight with panic. The FBI wouldn't freeze our accounts unless they had serious evidence. How serious? Carla asked. Criminal charges serious, the kind that could mean federal prison time. For inheritance paperwork, for insurance fraud, forgery, and theft. If they can prove I forged her signature or filed fraudulent death certificates, we're looking at decades in federal prison. What about the mental health narrative? Can we claim she's making delusional accusations? Not with forensic evidence. Handwriting analysis, document examination, financial records. They have proof, Carla. Real proof that we can't explain away with stories about her emotional problems. The fear in their voices was satisfying in a way that surprised me. For months they had felt secure in their manipulation and theft, confident that I was too emotional and trusting to fight back effectively. Agent Martinez played the final recording, a conversation between my parents from this morning. How did Helen figure out about the insurance money? Dad asked. She hired investigators, Mom replied. Professional people who knew what to look for. Can we return the money and avoid prosecution? It's too late for that. The FBI agent said they're treating this as organized crime because of Derek's professional involvement and the multiple fraud counts. Organized crime. Racketeering charges, Thomas. They're saying we operated a criminal enterprise to systematically steal from family members. We were just trying to consolidate family assets efficiently. We were stealing from our daughter and lying to cover it up. The insurance money alone is a federal felony with mandatory prison time. The conversation continued with increasing desperation as they realized the magnitude of their legal situation. Mom crying about losing her house to pay legal fees and restitution. Dad talking about the shame of being arrested in Hawaii in front of other tourists. Do you want to see the video footage from their arrests? Agent Thompson asked. I nodded, knowing I needed to witness the moment their crimes finally caught up with them. The first video showed Derek being handcuffed in the hotel lobby while other guests recorded the scene with their phones. His protests about the arrests being a misunderstanding were clearly audible, along with his demands to speak with lawyers who could clear up this confusion. Carla's arrest was more dramatic. She had apparently barricaded herself in their hotel room and required additional officers to convince her to surrender. The footage showed her being led through the hotel hallway in handcuffs while screaming about false accusations and family betrayal. She kept insisting that you were mentally ill and making up lies about inheritance theft, Agent Thompson noted. Even when confronted with forensic evidence, she maintained that the whole investigation was based on delusional accusations. My parents' arrests were quieter, but equally devastating. Dad maintained dignified silence while being processed, but Mom broke down completely when she realized that their crimes were being filmed by other resort guests. The videos have already been shared on social media, Agent Martinez informed me. Your family's arrests are becoming viral content, with thousands of people commenting about inheritance fraud and family financial abuse. The public humiliation was an unexpected bonus. Their crimes were being exposed not just to law enforcement and family members, but to complete strangers who were sharing their story as an example of justice being served. What about the other victims of Derek's insurance fraud? We've contacted them all. 12 families who lost inheritance money, insurance benefits, or property assets due to Derek's document manipulation. They're forming a class action lawsuit that will ensure he never works in insurance again. 12 other families. My decision to fight back had exposed a criminal enterprise that had been operating for years, stealing from people during their most vulnerable moments of grief and loss. Agent Thompson closed his laptop and began organizing the evidence files. Ms. Parker, your case has become a model for how family financial abuse should be investigated and prosecuted. The FBI is using your documentation methods to train agents who handle similar cases. The conference room door opened and Agent Martinez's supervisor entered carrying additional paperwork that would finalize the legal proceedings. Ms. Parker, he said formally, on behalf of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I want to thank you for your courage in exposing this criminal enterprise. Your willingness to pursue justice despite family pressure has prevented countless other families from being victimized by the same criminals. As I signed the final victim impact statements, I reflected on how completely the situation had reversed. This morning, my family had been confident criminals enjoying a vacation funded by stolen money. Tonight, they were federal prisoners facing decades in jail while their crimes became international news. The surprise I had promised them had exceeded even my expectations, delivering justice on a scale that would change their lives forever. Tomorrow would bring even more revelations as the FBI investigation expanded to encompass Derek's other victims and the full scope of their financial crimes. The Hotel Business Center had become my command post for monitoring the digital aftermath of my family's arrests. Videos of Derek being handcuffed in the resort lobby had gone viral on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, with millions of views and thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. Family Fraud Hawaii Arrest was trending on 3 different platforms, with news outlets picking up the story and legal experts offering commentary about inheritance crimes and insurance fraud. The hashtag Justice for Helen had appeared organically, with strangers rallying around my story as an example of fighting back against family manipulation. Sarah called me from Phoenix with updates that were almost too good to believe. Helen, the media attention is working in our favor beyond anything we could have planned. Derek's insurance company has fired him and is cooperating fully with federal investigators to avoid criminal liability for his actions. What about the other victims? They're coming forward in droves. The FBI has opened investigations into 17 additional cases of suspected insurance fraud, all connected to Derek's manipulation of beneficiary documents and inheritance claims. I scrolled through social media comments while Sarah talked, reading messages from people around the world who were inspired by my decision to pursue justice against family members. Many shared similar stories of inheritance theft, financial manipulation, and gaslighting by relatives who claimed to love them. One comment particularly stood out. My sister stole my father's life insurance money and told everyone I was too emotional to handle inheritance responsibilities. Seeing Helen fight back gives me hope that I can get justice too. The viral attention was transforming my personal case into a broader movement, encouraging victims of family financial abuse to speak up and seek legal recourse. Criminal justice advocates were sharing resources for people dealing with similar situations, and lawyers specializing in inheritance fraud were reporting increased calls from potential clients. The best part, Sarah continued, is that your family's lies about your mental health are being completely demolished by public opinion. People can see the evidence for themselves and recognize who the real criminals are. She was right. The contrast between my composed, well-documented legal case and their desperate lies about my psychological state was stark enough that even casual observers could identify the manipulation tactics they had used. My phone buzzed with a call from Jessica, who had apparently been following the social media coverage from Colorado. "Helen, I am so proud of you for fighting back," she said immediately upon my answering. "I've been reading about the arrests online, and I'm horrified by what they did to you. How much do you know?" "Everything. The inheritance theft, the insurance fraud, the fake death certificate. It's all over the news now. Legal experts are calling it one of the most sophisticated family fraud cases they've seen." Jessica's voice carried a mixture of admiration and anger that felt validating after months of questioning my own perceptions of events. "There's something else," she continued. "I've been calling other family members to make sure they know the truth. Aunt Linda is devastated that she believed their lies about your mental health. Uncle Robert wants to formally apologize for not recognizing the signs of their manipulation. The family support network that my parents and Carla had poisoned with lies was beginning to rebuild itself around the truth. Relatives who had been convinced I was unstable were now realizing they had been manipulated into enabling financial crimes against me. What about Aunt Linda?" "She's furious. She said she loaned Carla $5,000 last year because Carla claimed you were demanding unreasonable financial support from family members. Now she realizes that Carla was stealing from you while asking other relatives for money. Another layer of their financial manipulation was being exposed. They had not only stolen my inheritance, but had used lies about me to extract additional money from extended family members who thought they were helping with my supposed financial irresponsibility. My laptop chimed with a notification that TMZ had posted an article about the Hawaii arrests. The headline read, "Family Vacation Turns into Federal Crime Scene, Sister's Inheritance Fraud Exposed in Paradise." The article included photos from the resort, quotes from other guests who had witnessed the confrontations, and legal analysis of the criminal charges being filed. Most importantly, it included excerpts from the FBI evidence showing the scope of Derek's insurance fraud enterprise. Twitter notifications were coming in constantly as legal commentators and crime journalists shared the story. A thread by a prominent inheritance lawyer had been retweeted thousands of times, explaining how families can protect themselves from similar fraud and encouraging people to review their own estate documents for signs of manipulation. This case is becoming a teaching moment for the entire legal community. Sarah observed during our afternoon check-in call. Law schools are already asking for permission to use your documentation methods in courses about family financial crimes. The educational value of my case was something I hadn't anticipated. By fighting back so thoroughly and documenting everything so carefully, I had created a blueprint that other victims could follow when pursuing justice against family members who had stolen from them. But the most satisfying aspect of the social media coverage was watching my family's carefully constructed lies collapse under public scrutiny. Their narrative about my mental health problems and unreasonable demands looked increasingly ridiculous as evidence of their crimes became public knowledge. A prominent psychiatrist had posted a Twitter thread analyzing the psychological tactics used in family financial abuse cases, specifically referencing my situation. Gaslighting victims by claiming they have mental health issues is a common strategy for covering up financial crimes. The perpetrators project their own guilt by claiming the victim is delusional or paranoid. The thread had been shared by thousands of mental health professionals, creating a public discourse about how psychological manipulation is used to enable financial abuse within families. Instagram stories from other resort guests were providing additional documentation of the arrests and my family's behavior during their final days in Hawaii. Videos showed them arguing with hotel staff about payment issues, making frantic phone calls to lawyers and banks, and ultimately being led away in handcuffs while other tourists recorded everything. One particularly viral video showed Carla screaming at federal agents about false accusations while being loaded into a police vehicle. The audio was clear enough to hear her claiming that I was mentally ill and making up lies about inheritance money, even as evidence of her crimes was being read to her during the arrest. The disconnect between her claims and the documented evidence was so obvious that internet commenters were using the video as an example of how criminals rationalize their behavior even when caught red-handed. My phone rang with a call from a producer at a major television news magazine show. They wanted to interview me about family financial abuse and my decision to pursue federal charges against my immediate family. "We think your story could help other victims recognize similar patterns in their own families," the producer explained. The sophisticated nature of the manipulation and the legal resolution could provide valuable guidance for people dealing with inheritance theft. The interview would be broadcast nationally, reaching millions of people who might not otherwise learn about family financial abuse or know that legal recourse is available for inheritance fraud. As evening approached in Hawaii, I sat on my suite balcony, reading messages of support from strangers around the world who had been inspired by my decision to fight back against family crime. The sunset painted the ocean in shades of gold and purple that seemed more beautiful knowing that justice had been served. Tomorrow would bring additional revelations as the FBI investigation expanded and more victims of Derek's insurance fraud came forward. But tonight, I was content knowing that their years of lies and manipulation had been exposed to the world and that other families would be protected from similar crimes because of the attention my case had generated. The surprise I had promised them had become a global conversation about justice, family loyalty, and the courage required to hold loved ones accountable for criminal behavior. The resort owner's private office overlooked the entire property, from the infinity pools where my family had been arrested to the private beaches where federal agents had conducted their investigation. Marcus Yamamoto was a distinguished man in his 70s with the kind of gentle wisdom that comes from decades of hospitality experience and genuine care for his guests. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he said, settling into a leather chair beside floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the Pacific Ocean. "She brought you here several times when you were a little girl. You probably don't remember those visits." I stared at him in confusion. "I've never been to Hawaii before this week." "Oh, but you have..." Marcus smiled, pulling out a photo album from his desk drawer. "Your grandmother was one of our most valued guests for nearly 20 years. She always said this resort was her sanctuary, the place where she felt most at peace." He opened the album to reveal photos that took my breath away. There was grandmother, at least 15 years younger, standing beside a swimming pool with a little girl who looked exactly like me at age 7 or 8. More photos showed us building sandcastles, sharing ice cream, and watching sunset from the same balcony where I was currently staying. "The presidential suite was her favorite accommodation," Marcus continued. "She always said it would be yours someday when you were old enough to appreciate the beauty and serenity of this place." The memories came flooding back in fragments that had been buried by time and grief. Summer trips that I had been told were visits to distant relatives, airplane flights that seemed magical and exotic, a beautiful woman with silver hair who taught me to snorkel and told me stories about ocean spirits and family traditions. "She made specific arrangements for your future visits," Marcus said, pulling out a legal document from his desk. "This resort was her second home, and she wanted to ensure you would always have a place here." The document was dated 3 months before grandmother's death. It established a trust fund specifically for my use at the resort, prepaid accommodations and activities that would last for decades. The presidential suite, spa treatments, dining credits, and access to private areas of the property, all arranged to ensure I could continue the family tradition of finding peace in this Hawaiian paradise. The trust fund was valued at $250,000, Marcus explained. "Your grandmother worked with our legal team to create an arrangement that would be completely separate from her estate, protected from any family disputes or inheritance complications." $250,000, another $250,000 that my family had somehow hidden from me, probably by intercepting legal communications and forging documents to redirect the trust benefits. "Did anyone else in my family know about this arrangement?" "Your sister and brother-in-law visited last year shortly after your grandmother's death. They claimed to represent your interests and attempted to liquidate the trust fund for cash distribution." My stomach clenched. "Were they successful?" "Fortunately, no. The trust documents were very specific about requiring your personal appearance and signature for any changes. When they couldn't provide adequate identification and authorization, our legal team declined their requests." Marcus opened another folder containing correspondence between the resort and my family. Letters from Carla claiming I had assigned power of attorney to her for all trust matters. Emails from Derek demanding immediate cash liquidation of the resort credits. Legal threats about unreasonable trust restrictions that prevented family members from accessing assets on my behalf. "They were very persistent," Marcus noted diplomatically, "and increasingly aggressive when we maintained that only you could make decisions about your grandmother's gift." "What did they tell you about me?" "That you were having emotional difficulties and couldn't handle the stress of travel or trust management. They suggested that liquidating the fund would be in your best interest, providing cash for therapy and medical treatment." Even in death, grandmother had protected me from their manipulation by creating legal structures they couldn't circumvent. The resort trust was designed specifically to prevent other family members from stealing or redirecting benefits that were meant exclusively for me. "There's something else," Marcus said, his expression growing more serious. "Your sister and brother-in-law made some troubling statements during their visit. They seemed to believe that your grandmother's gifts to you were excessive and unfair to other family members." He pulled out a folder marked Guest Relations Incident Report and handed me several typed pages documenting their behavior during that visit. According to the report, Carla had become increasingly agitated and verbally abusive when told that the trust fund couldn't be liquidated without my presence. She had accused resort staff of enabling Helen's selfish hoarding of family assets and claimed that I was manipulating a senile old woman to steal money from deserving relatives. Derek had threatened legal action against the resort for discriminatory trust administration and demanded to speak with ownership about correcting the inappropriate distribution of estate assets. The incident had become serious enough that resort security was called to escort them from the property after Carla began shouting accusations about my mental health and demanding that staff contact me directly to expose Helen's lies about wanting to honor grandmother's memory. "We actually did try to contact you," Marcus admitted, "multiple times over the past year, but the contact information your family provided led to disconnected numbers and returned mail. They gave you fake contact information." "It appears so. Phone numbers that went to voicemail boxes claiming to be your number, but the voice was clearly your sister's. A mailing address that turned out to be a post office box registered under Derek's business name. They had intercepted my grandmother's final gift, preventing me from even learning about the resort trust, while attempting to steal those assets just as they had stolen everything else from her estate." Marcus reached for his phone and dialed an internal extension. "Patricia, could you please bring the Grandmother Parker memorial items from the vault?" Within minutes, Patricia appeared carrying a wooden box inlaid with Hawaiian designs that looked like a family heirloom. Marcus opened it carefully, revealing contents that made my eyes fill with tears. Letters addressed to me in grandmother's handwriting, sealed and dated for specific birthdays and milestones. A piece of jewelry that had belonged to her mother wrapped in tissue paper, with a note explaining its history and significance. Photos of our Hawaiian visits together, along with her written memories of the adventures we had shared. "She wanted you to have these when you returned to the resort," Marcus explained. "She was very specific that they should only be given to you personally, never to family members claiming to represent your interests." The top letter was marked, "For Helen's next visit to paradise," in grandmother's careful script. Inside, her words revealed the depth of her love and concern for my future. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, then you've returned to our special place and discovered the arrangements I've made for your comfort and happiness. I chose this resort as your sanctuary because I knew there would come a time when you needed a refuge from family complications and life's difficulties. I've seen how your sister and parents sometimes overlook your needs and contributions. I've watched them take your generosity for granted and exclude you from decisions that affect your future. That's why I created this trust fund separately from my estate, where it can't be touched or redirected by anyone who doesn't have your best interests at heart. This place was where I found peace during my own family troubles, and I want it to be your retreat whenever the world becomes too heavy to bear alone. The money I've set aside will ensure that you can always return here, always have a beautiful place to think clearly and remember how much you are loved. I suspect that other family members may try to convince you that these arrangements are excessive or unfair. Don't listen to them. You deserve beauty and peace and sanctuary, and I have the right to provide those gifts to the granddaughter who brought me such joy during our adventures together. Love always, grandmother. The letter was dated 1 week before her death, written by a woman who understood exactly what kind of family dynamics I would face after her passing. She had anticipated their attempts to steal from me and had taken legal steps to protect at least some portion of her love from their greed. Marcus closed the memorial box and handed me an additional document. This is your current trust statement. The account has continued earning interest and dividends over the past year, bringing the total value to approximately $280,000. All for resort expenses. Accommodations, dining activities, spa services, and anything else that enhances your experience here. Your grandmother wanted to ensure that financial concerns would never prevent you from enjoying this place she loved so much. As if the day couldn't become more emotionally overwhelming, Patricia returned with another item, a folder containing booking confirmations for a vacation package that had been purchased but never used. Your grandmother booked this for your family 1 year ago, Marcus explained. A week-long stay for 5 people with premium accommodations and all activities included. She wanted to surprise everyone with a final family vacation that would create lasting memories. The booking confirmations were dated 6 months before grandmother's death, prepaid in full with detailed notes about everyone's preferences and special requests. She had planned a reunion vacation for her entire family, using her own money to bring everyone together in the paradise she loved. What happened to those reservations? No one claimed them. After your grandmother's death, we waited for the family to contact us about the arrangements, but no one ever called to confirm or modify the bookings. My family had ignored or hidden grandmother's final gift of a family vacation, just as they had stolen every other asset she had intended for my benefit. Even her dreams of bringing us together had been discarded in favor of their own manipulative plans and financial theft. The reservations are still valid, Marcus added. Your grandmother's booking included flexible dates, so the vacation package remains available whenever you choose to honor her intentions. I looked around the office that had become a museum of my family's betrayal and my grandmother's love, surrounded by evidence of arrangements made to protect me and gifts meant to bring us together. The contrast between her generous spirit and their calculated cruelty was almost too much to process. The phone rang, interrupting our conversation with news that would add another layer to an already incredible day. Mr. Yamamoto, Patricia said from the doorway. The FBI agents are requesting another meeting with Ms. Parker. They say they have additional evidence that involves the Resort Trust Fund. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Apparently, my family's attempts to steal from grandmother's resort arrangements had also been documented by federal investigators. The surprise I had promised them was continuing to expand, revealing additional crimes and victims with each new piece of evidence that surfaced. The FBI conference room felt different this time, charged with the electricity of a major case reaching its climax. Agent Martinez had been joined by 3 additional federal agents, a prosecutor from the district attorney's office, and a specialist from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, who had flown in from Washington specifically to discuss my family's case. Ms. Parker. The prosecutor began, "Your case has become significantly more complex than a simple inheritance dispute. We're now investigating your family for operating a criminal enterprise that spans multiple jurisdictions and involves numerous victims." Agent Martinez spread out financial documents that looked like a forensic accountant's nightmare. Bank statements, wire transfer records, property deeds, and insurance policies connected by red lines that showed the flow of stolen money through various accounts and investments. The Resort Trust Fund was just the beginning, she explained. Derek has been using his insurance industry access to identify wealthy families dealing with death and estate planning, then manipulating their documentation to redirect assets to himself and your sister. The scope of their crimes was staggering. What I had experienced was not an isolated family dispute, but part of a systematic criminal enterprise that had been targeting grieving families for years. How many victims are we talking about? 43 families across 6 states. The financial crimes specialist answered. Total losses estimated at over $2.3 million in redirected inheritances, stolen insurance benefits, and fraudulent estate modifications. $2.3 million. Derek had been operating a criminal empire that made my family's theft look small by comparison. though my case had provided the evidence needed to expose the entire operation. Your decision to fight back triggered an investigation that has already recovered assets for dozens of other families. The prosecutor continued. Several victims have contacted us to express gratitude for your courage in pursuing legal action. Agent Thompson opened his laptop and showed me emails from other victims whose inheritances had been stolen by Derek's document manipulation schemes. Stories similar to mine grieving family members who discovered that inheritance assets had been redirected through forged signatures and fraudulent beneficiary changes. The pattern is identical across all cases, Agent Martinez noted. Derek identifies families dealing with death and estate distribution, uses his professional access to manipulate documentation, then covers the theft by claiming the victims are emotionally unstable or financially irresponsible. What about Carla and my parents? Co-conspirators in the larger enterprise. Carla served as the primary recipient for redirected assets, while your parents provided legitimacy and family connections that made the fraud more believable. The prosecutor pulled out a thick legal document that looked like a novel. These are the formal charges being filed against all 4 family members: racketeering conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse insurance fraud forgery, and organized crime enterprise. Reading through the charges was like reviewing a catalog of every possible financial crime. Each count carried potential sentences ranging from 5 to 25 years in federal prison, with mandatory minimum sentencing that meant my family would be incarcerated for decades regardless of plea bargaining. The elder abuse charges are particularly serious, the prosecutor explained. They targeted elderly individuals during periods of grief and medical vulnerability, using emotional manipulation to gain access to estate documents and financial accounts. Agent Martinez showed me photos from other crime scenes: luxury cars purchased with stolen inheritance money, expensive homes financed through redirected insurance benefits, and vacation properties bought with assets taken from grieving families. Your Hawaii confrontation was broadcast live on social media, just as we were preparing to raid their other properties, she noted. The timing was perfect for our evidence collection. What other properties? 3 rental properties purchased with stolen money, 2 luxury vehicles financed through fraudulent insurance claims, and investment accounts containing redirected assets from multiple victims. The financial crime specialist opened a briefcase containing additional evidence that showed the sophisticated nature of their criminal enterprise. Professional-grade forgery equipment found in Derek's home office software programs designed to replicate official government seals and signatures and training materials about exploiting grief reactions for financial gain. Derek had been studying psychological techniques for manipulating bereaved family members, she explained. Books about emotional vulnerability, courses about insurance fraud, detection avoidance, and step-by-step guides for creating convincing forged documents. The calculation behind their crimes was more disturbing than the financial theft itself. They had deliberately educated themselves about exploiting human grief and trauma for profit, turning other people's worst moments into opportunities for personal enrichment. My phone buzzed with a call from Sarah, who was apparently coordinating with federal agents from her Phoenix office. "Helen," she said when I answered on speakerphone, "the asset seizure is more extensive than we originally planned. The FBI is confiscating everything your family purchased with stolen money over the past 3 years." "Everything?" "Carla's house, Derek's business, your parents' retirement accounts, luxury items, vehicles, and investment properties. The total value of seized assets is approaching $800,000. $800,000 worth of property and investments purchased with money stolen from me and other victims. The lifestyle they had been enjoying was built entirely on criminal proceeds, making their comfort and success a direct result of other people's suffering. What happens to those assets? Full restitution to all victims, starting with you, since your case provided the evidence that broke open the entire investigation," the prosecutor answered. You'll receive complete recovery of your stolen inheritance, plus additional compensation for emotional distress and legal expenses. Agent Thompson pulled up a spreadsheet showing the distribution calculations. Between my original inheritance, the resort trust fund accumulated interest and penalties, and compensation for damages, my total restitution would exceed $400,000. $400,000. Your case involved the longest duration of theft and the most sophisticated emotional manipulation, the financial crimes specialist explained. The psychological abuse and reputation damage warrant additional compensation beyond simple asset recovery. The amount was more money than I had ever imagined having, representing not just recovery of what was stolen, but acknowledgement of the emotional trauma they had inflicted through years of manipulation and lies. "There's one more thing," Agent Martinez said, pulling out a final document that looked different from the others. "Your family's defense attorney has requested a plea conference to discuss potential cooperation with ongoing investigations. They want to make a deal. They're facing mandatory minimum sentences of 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Their attorney is suggesting they might provide information about other criminal associates in exchange for reduced sentencing." The irony was perfect. After years of manipulating and betraying family relationships for financial gain, they were now preparing to betray criminal associates to reduce their own punishment. What kind of information? Names of other insurance agents involved in similar fraud schemes, techniques used to identify vulnerable targets, and financial networks used to launder stolen inheritance money, the prosecutor explained. Your family was apparently part of a larger criminal organization that specializes in exploiting grief for profit. The investigation that started with my Hawaii vacation exclusion had uncovered an entire criminal network that preyed on families dealing with death and inheritance issues. My decision to fight back had exposed crimes that affected hundreds of people across multiple states. "Do you want to hear their plea offer?" Agent Martinez asked. I considered the question carefully. Part of me wanted to know whether they showed any genuine remorse or recognition of the harm they had caused, but another part of me suspected that their plea negotiations would involve the same manipulation and self-serving lies they had used throughout our relationship. Will their cooperation significantly help other victims? Potentially. The information they provide could lead to recovery of assets for families who have been searching for stolen inheritance money for years. Then I want to hear what they have to say. The prosecutor made a phone call to arrange the plea conference, which would allow me to hear directly from my family about their crimes and their willingness to help investigators recover assets for other victims. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, this time in a federal courthouse rather than a Hawaiian resort. The surprise I had promised them was reaching its culmination with justice being delivered on a scale that would change dozens of lives and expose a criminal enterprise that had been operating in shadows for years. But first, I would return to my presidential suite overlooking the Pacific Ocean, where I would spend one final evening in the paradise my grandmother had chosen as my sanctuary, knowing that her love and protection had ultimately triumphed over their greed and manipulation. The federal courthouse in Honolulu was a modern building that commanded respect with its clean lines and American flags fluttering in the tropical breeze. I sat in a conference room designed for high-stakes legal negotiations surrounded by federal agents, prosecutors, and victim advocates who had assembled to hear my family's plea allocution and cooperation offer. Through the conference room windows, I could see news vans from major television networks parked outside. My case had become a national story about family financial abuse, inspiring legislation and legal reforms to protect inheritance rights and prevent elder abuse in estate planning. Before we bring in the defendants, the prosecutor explained, I want you to understand that they may attempt emotional manipulation during their statements. Criminals often use family relationships and expressions of love to minimize accountability for their crimes. Agent Martinez nodded in agreement. We've seen this pattern in dozens of white-collar family crime cases. The perpetrators claim they were trying to help or protect family members, even when confronted with clear evidence of calculated theft and fraud. The door opened and my family entered in orange jail uniforms and restraints, looking nothing like the confident criminals who had excluded me from Hawaii, while demanding payment for stolen vacation expenses. The physical transformation was striking, but their expression still carried hints of the entitlement and manipulation that had defined our relationship for years. Derek spoke first, his voice carrying the rehearsed tone of someone who had been coached by defense attorneys on optimal sentencing presentations. "Helen, I want you to know that everything we did was intended to consolidate family assets for everyone's benefit," he began. "The insurance and inheritance paperwork was complicated, and we were trying to simplify the distribution process." The lie was so audacious that several federal agents exchanged glances. Derek was characterizing sophisticated forgery and systematic theft as family financial planning, maintaining the same manipulation tactics that had enabled years of criminal behavior. "The death certificate paperwork was a mistake in processing," he continued. "I never intended to file fraudulent documentation, and I certainly never meant to cause you emotional harm." Agent Thompson slid a folder across the table containing recordings of Derek's phone conversations, where he explicitly discussed forging my signature and filing false death certificates to steal my insurance benefits. The contrast between his current claims and his documented criminal planning was stark enough to make his defense attorney cringe with embarrassment. Carla spoke next, her voice trembling with what appeared to be genuine emotion, but carried undertones of the same self-serving manipulation she had always used. "Helen, I love you so much, and I never wanted to hurt our family relationship," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The Hawaii vacation was supposed to be a surprise for you, but the planning got complicated, and we made poor decisions about communication." The revision of history was breathtaking. She was now claiming that my exclusion from Hawaii had been intended as a surprise rather than a deliberate betrayal, transforming their months of lies into a misunderstanding about surprise party planning. "The payment requests were supposed to be a joke," Carla continued. "We thought you would find it funny that we were asking you to contribute to a vacation you were going to be surprised with." The prosecutor showed her printouts of her social media posts, celebrating my exclusion text messages, coordinating lies about my mental health, and recorded phone conversations where she discussed billing me for vacation expenses to add financial pressure during emotional trauma. The evidence demolished her claims about surprise planning and joke payment requests. Mom's statement was the most emotionally difficult to hear, combining genuine maternal love with continued attempts to manipulate and minimize their criminal behavior. "Helen, sweetheart, you have to understand that we were worried about your financial future," she said in the tone she had used to comfort me during childhood illnesses. "Grandmother's estate was so complicated, and we thought consolidating everything under Carla's management would protect you from stress and responsibility." "By filing fraudulent death certificates claiming I was dead?" I asked directly. Mom's composure cracked. "We didn't know Derek was going to do that. We thought the insurance paperwork would be handled legally and properly." Agent Martinez showed her financial records proving that Mom had been receiving monthly payments from the rental property income that should have been shared with me. Bank deposits that continued for over a year, totaling more than $15,000 in stolen rental income that had funded her lifestyle improvements. "You knew the money was supposed to be shared equally," I said quietly. "You knew I was being excluded from inheritance assets while being billed for family expenses. We were planning to include you once the legal complications were resolved," Mom replied desperately. "We just wanted to make sure everything was handled correctly before bringing you into the financial planning." Dad's statement was the most honest, perhaps because his lifetime of military service had instilled some respect for accountability and truth, even in the face of criminal consequences. "Helen, there's no excuse for what we did," he said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time since entering the conference room. "We made selfish choices that hurt you financially and emotionally. We betrayed your trust and violated our responsibilities as family members." His admission was more meaningful than the others' continued manipulation, suggesting some genuine recognition of the harm they had caused and the relationship damage that could never be fully repaired. "I know we can't undo the financial theft or the emotional abuse," Dad continued, "but we can provide information that helps other families recover stolen assets and prevents other criminals from using similar schemes." The prosecutor leaned forward with interest. "Tell us about the criminal network you were part of." Derek's defense attorney objected to the phrasing, but Derek himself began providing details about insurance agents, lawyers, and financial planners who had collaborated on inheritance fraud schemes targeting vulnerable families. "There are at least 12 other insurance agents using similar document forgery techniques," Derek admitted. "We shared information about targeting strategies, legal loopholes, and methods for avoiding detection." The confession revealed a criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond my family's individual crimes. Professional networks that educated members about exploiting grief and manipulating legal documents for profit, operating across multiple states with sophisticated coordination and communication. "What about the psychological manipulation techniques?" Agent Martinez asked. Carla's defense attorney advised her not to answer, but she ignored the legal advice in favor of attempting to justify their behavior. "We research methods for managing family conflict during estate planning," she said carefully. "There are books and courses about helping family members accept difficult financial decisions. By claiming they have mental health problems and spreading lies to extended family," I asked. "By understanding emotional reactions and providing appropriate support during grief processing," she replied, maintaining the manipulation even while confessing to crimes. The session continued for 3 hours with my family, providing information about dozens of other victims' criminal associates and financial schemes that had operated for years without detection. Their cooperation would help investigators recover millions of dollars in stolen assets and prevent future crimes against vulnerable families. But their statements also revealed the depth of calculation behind their betrayal, showing how deliberately they had planned my financial destruction while maintaining the illusion of family love and support. As the plea conference concluded, the prosecutor announced the final sentencing recommendations: 15 years in federal prison, for Derek 12 years, for Carla 8 years for Dad, and 6 years for Mom, with mandatory restitution to all victims and permanent prohibition from working in financial services industries. The sentences reflect the sophisticated nature of the crimes and the number of victims affected, the prosecutor explained. But they also acknowledge the defendant's cooperation in exposing a larger criminal enterprise. My family would spend the next decade or more in federal prison, their comfortable lifestyle replaced by the consequences of their choices to prey on grief and manipulate family relationships for profit. As they were led away in restraints, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served, but the relationship betrayal would affect me for years, regardless of legal outcomes. The surprise I had promised them had delivered consequences beyond anything they had imagined when they excluded me from Hawaii while demanding payment for stolen vacation expenses. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter where I could rebuild my life with recovered assets and the knowledge that their criminal enterprise had been stopped before it could victimize additional families. But tonight, I would return to my grandmother's sanctuary resort, where her love and protection had provided the foundation for my fight against their betrayal. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new home in Sedona, Arizona, watching the sunrise paint red rock formations in shades of gold and crimson that reminded me why I had chosen this peaceful place to rebuild my life. The house was modest but beautiful, purchased with restitution money that represented more than financial recovery. It symbolized justice, healing, and the triumph of truth over manipulation. The federal case had concluded with full convictions for all family members. Derek received 18 years in federal prison after additional insurance fraud charges were filed, based on evidence from other victims. Carla was sentenced to 14 years after pleading guilty to racketeering and elder abuse. Dad received 10 years while Mom got 7 years with the possibility of early release for continued cooperation with ongoing investigations. Their criminal enterprise had been completely dismantled with recovered assets totaling over $4.2 million, returned to 47 families across 8 states. The FBI had credited my decision to fight back as the catalyst that exposed the entire operation and prevented countless future crimes. But the most meaningful outcome wasn't the financial recovery or criminal convictions. It was the relationships I had rebuilt with extended family members who now understood the truth about years of manipulation and lies. Cousin Jessica had moved to Arizona and become one of my closest friends, sharing weekend adventures and family traditions that honored our grandmother's memory. Uncle Robert had formally apologized for believing lies about my mental health and now referred other families dealing with inheritance fraud to the legal resources we had used. Aunt Linda had recovered her $5,000 loan to Carla and donated it to a foundation I had established to help families pursue legal action against inheritance fraud. The foundation provided investigative services and legal support for victims who couldn't afford private attorneys or professional forensic analysis. The Hawaii resort had become my annual retreat, where I honored grandmother's memory by enjoying the sanctuary she had created and sharing its beauty with friends who appreciated both its natural splendor and its significance in my journey toward justice. Marcus Yamamoto had become a surrogate grandfather figure, sharing stories about grandmother's visits and her concerns about family dynamics that had proven remarkably prescient. The trust fund she had established continued generating resources for peaceful vacations and spiritual renewal. My marketing consultancy had grown into a successful business specializing in crisis communication and reputation recovery for families dealing with financial crimes. The skills I had developed during my own case translated into valuable services for other victims seeking to rebuild their lives after betrayal by relatives. The media attention from my case had led to speaking opportunities at conferences about family financial abuse, elder fraud prevention, and the importance of pursuing legal action despite emotional attachment to criminal family members. Law enforcement agencies used our case as a training example for investigating inheritance fraud and identifying psychological manipulation tactics. But the most surprising development had been the relationships with other crime victims who had reached out after seeing news coverage of my family's prosecution. A community of survivors who supported each other through healing processes and celebrated victories in cases where justice prevailed over family loyalty. Sarah Chen had become both a close friend and my legal advisor for the foundation work. Her expertise in family financial crimes was now supported by federal grants that helped her provide services to victims who couldn't afford private investigation and litigation. The foundation had already assisted 23 families in recovering stolen assets and prosecuting relatives who had committed inheritance fraud. Each case reinforced the lesson that criminals who prey on family relationships eventually face consequences for their choices. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. "Are you ready for tomorrow's foundation board meeting? The new cases look promising for recovery." Tomorrow we would review applications from families seeking assistance with inheritance fraud investigations, many inspired by news coverage of my case to pursue legal action they had previously considered impossible or inappropriate. The board included Agent Martinez, who had retired from the FBI to work full-time on family financial crime prevention, a federal prosecutor who specialized in elder abuse cases, and several other crime victims who had successfully recovered assets from relatives who had stolen from them. But the most important board member was a woman named Margaret Chen, whose case had been solved using evidence techniques developed during my family's investigation. Her nephew had stolen over $600,000 from her late husband's estate using document forgery methods similar to Derek's schemes. The foundation gave me hope that justice was possible. Margaret had told our first board meeting, Before reading Helen's story, I thought family loyalty meant accepting financial abuse and staying silent about criminal behavior. Her words captured the central lesson of my experience. True family loyalty doesn't require protecting relatives from consequences of their crimes or enabling continued victimization of other family members. The evening news was broadcasting an update about another inheritance fraud case that had been solved using investigative methods pioneered during my family's prosecution. A family in Ohio had recovered over $300,000, stolen by relatives who had manipulated estate documents while claiming to protect a deceased parent's legacy. This case represents the 15th major inheritance fraud prosecution, inspired by the Parker family investigation. The reporter noted, legal experts credit Helen Parker's decision to pursue federal charges as a turning point in how law enforcement approaches family financial crimes. The ripple effects continued expanding as other victims found courage to speak up and seek legal recourse for betrayal by relatives who had violated trust for profit. Each new case reinforced the message that family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior or eliminate accountability for financial abuse. As sunset approached over the red rocks of Sedona, I reflected on the journey from that devastating morning when I was excluded from Hawaii to this evening when I was surrounded by chosen family who honored truth and supported justice. The life lesson had emerged slowly but clearly through months of legal battles and emotional healing. Families who truly love you don't steal your inheritance and exclude you from vacations while demanding payment for their betrayal. People who genuinely care about your well-being don't spread lies about your mental health to justify financial crimes. Real family members celebrate your success rather than undermining it, include you in planning rather than excluding you from participation, and support your happiness rather than manipulating your emotions for personal gain. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members who have become criminals is to hold them accountable for their choices, even when that accountability involves federal prosecution and prison sentences. And sometimes the best family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you choose based on shared values of honesty, loyalty, and genuine care for each other's welfare. The surprise I had promised them that day in Hawaii had delivered justice on a scale that changed dozens of lives and prevented countless future crimes. But the greatest surprise had been discovering that I was stronger, braver, and more deserving of love than I had ever allowed myself to believe. The foundation work would continue expanding, helping other families recover from financial betrayal and pursue justice, despite family pressure to remain silent. The legal reforms inspired by our case would protect future victims from similar manipulation and abuse. But tonight I was simply grateful to be surrounded by people who celebrated truth rather than enabling lies, who supported justice rather than protecting criminals, and who understood that holding family members accountable for criminal behavior is an act of love rather than betrayal. Have you ever experienced financial manipulation by family members who claim to love you while stealing your assets? Have you discovered that relatives were spreading lies about your mental health to justify their criminal behavior? Share your stories in the comments below, and remember that seeking justice isn't betraying family. It's protecting yourself and other potential victims from people who have chosen crime over love. If you found strength in this story, please like and subscribe for more content about overcoming family betrayal and finding healing after financial abuse. Share this video with others who might need encouragement to pursue legal action against relatives who have stolen from them. Thank you for joining me on this journey toward justice and healing. Remember that you deserve honest relationships, financial security, and family members who celebrate your success rather than undermining it for their own benefit. Sometimes fighting back against the people who hurt us is the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for other potential victims who need protection from the same criminals. Stay strong, seek truth, and never let anyone convince you that family loyalty requires accepting abuse or protecting people from the consequences of their choices to harm you.